Square Enix has quickly become a company that doesn't really know what their audience wants, and now a Final Fantasy VII producer is coming out saying he's a bit embarrassed by the original game's portrayal of social problems, social issues, and cultural depictions, further proving how out of touch these people actually are with their consumers. I have a few things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. Now, obviously, this producer is allowed to have his own opinions, but we live in a time where creatives are so afraid of being canceled, they feel the need to throw their older work under the bus, even if that work is beloved, like Final Fantasy VII. So the article starts off with saying Yoshinori Kitase, producer of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is embarrassed how the original game he directed handled social issues and cultural depictions, but he is not only the producer of the Final Fantasy VII remakes, but he was the director of the original Final Fantasy VII, of Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy X, the producer of several of these games as well, and he has worked for so many years to help build the company to be known as such an amazing company, and they have stumbled over the past few years. That's undeniable, with things like censorship and taking games in directions people were not particularly happy with, like Final Fantasy going away from turn-based, but they still come out with some amazing games. Like Final Fantasy XVI was one of my favorite games of 2023. They've released Star Ocean, Octopath Traveler 1 and 2. I'm looking forward to Visions of Mana as well. Like, they still make really great games, but at the same time, it is important to note that they have stumbled, and now you've got this producer coming out saying that he's embarrassed about his original creations, which doesn't look good for them. Talking, of course, about how Final Fantasy VII changed the course of the company, and they also discussed how the game handled real-world issues back in 1997, giving examples of, corporate greed, environmentalism, and mental health. In Final Fantasy VII, we were able to depict these types of issues, like the cycle of life, through the concept of life stream. If we were to depict it exactly as we experience it in the real world, it would not be very interesting. And with some of the ideas, we were able to have this centered on life stream and the planet within the worldview of Final Fantasy VII. In this way, I believe the game and its themes remain relevant and withstand the test of time, which of course, I completely agree. But instead of just leaving it there and praising their previous work, and despite having just declared the game was standing the test of time, Kitase followed up with how he was disappointed with Final Fantasy VII, saying, considering the way to depict social problems, social issues, and cultural depictions, in some ways I am a bit embarrassed by the original title. Now, of course, he's talking about some of the jokes that are thrown into there. Of course, you also have, the infamous cross-dressing scenes that are put into this. Like, there are elements in Final Fantasy VII in which, of course, some people have taken offense to over the years, but this is such a sad situation, right? Because this is someone who has defended his work for over 26 years at this point, someone who has never thrown his work under the bus until now, until we are in an age where you have to be afraid of the work you have made previously, or else you could potentially be canceled for it. I mean, this game, it did extremely well for Square Enix. Within 3 days of its release in Japan in 1997, it sold over 2 million copies. This popularity inspired thousands of retailers in North America to break street dates in September of that year to meet public demands for the title. In the game's debut weekend in North America, it sold over 350,000 copies and had reached sales of 500,000 copies copies in less than 3 weeks. It did so well. Sony announced the game had sold over 1 million copies by early December of that year, and analysts said that Sony redefined the RPG category and expanded the conventional audience with the launch of Final Fantasy VII. That is not a bad game. Those are descriptors of a great game, a game that people still talk about today because of how amazing it turned out to be, and a game that still stands the test of time, a game that people still talk about today because of how good it turned out to be. And it's just so sad to see creatives feel so scared and embarrassed of the content that they have previously released because they are afraid of what could happen to their careers today. Of course, there are individuals on social media like Twitter/X that will find something to complain about, will find something to be offended by, and then they will cancel him and his work. And of course, let's also not forget the fact that Square Enix now has an internal ethics department where they siphon through the content, they sift through piece by piece and remove anything that is offensive. I know that people were generally upset with the first Final Fantasy VII Remake. Rebirth comes out, of course, in a month and a half, but the first part of the remake, because they did remove some scenes, and of course, things like the Honeybee Inn were toned down, people were upset because they did remove elements that today could be considered offensive, but it's no surprise when you know about this ethics department. I mean, of course, the ethics department also had, most notably, toned down the female character models. Square Enix has an ethics department, and it told the Final Fantasy VII Remake developers to restrict Tifa's chest, saying that it was necessary, that she did not have any sort of exaggerated body proportions, or the focus was not put on her chest or her body in any way, shape, or form. Like, we cannot even have pretty women in video games anymore without somebody getting bothered by it, somebody getting slightly offended by it. And of course, we do not know if Final Fantasy VII Part 2/Rebirth is going to, follow this trend. One would assume that it will, because this ethics department does exist, even though not very long ago, the ethics department webpage magically disappeared from Square Enix's website. That video will be linked down below, but one would assume that they are, of course, going to follow in these footsteps and continue to tone down Final Fantasy. And it does not sound all that surprising, given that you have some of the original creatives who will not even defend it because they are afraid. Now, of course, this is a major, major problem, because the people that you are trying to censor your game for, that you are trying to tone down your game for and ultimately apologize to, will never forgive you. They are always going to remember that you created that content in the past, and that to them is grounds enough to cancel you and to cancel your work. Like with Final Fantasy VII remakes, there are people out there who went, I'm not going to support this because I know what the original game had in it. I know what you guys did with that original title. Even though half the developers are still not the same, I'm still not going to support this product. It's people like me, and of course people like you that are watching this video, that are going to support them and try our best to defend them, but they come out with interviews like this where it is hard to defend them because they will not even defend themselves and defend their original creations. It's just a very sad time to have to, look at these amazing creatives decide not to defend their work, because makes it hard for us to defend their work. I love the original Final Fantasy VII, and I do think that the Final Fantasy VII Remake has a lot of good going for it. Like, it was an enjoyable experience, and I will be playing the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because of course that is part of my job, is to play video games and, give you guys reviews of them. But I do have to be honest, this is just a very unfortunate situation when creatives will not even defend their past work. It is sad to see, not very surprising though, but of course, Rebirth comes out in a month and a half. A lot of people are starting to talk about it, and I hope that going into, other interviews, maybe they will actually be a little bit different, where some of these creatives will praise the previous work that has been done, but only time will tell. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.